All right, you guys. So we've gotten all the tools in place on Facebook to get your first campaign going, but there's a few other things we want to gather and kind of get ready before we get started. So pulling together images and writing ad copy ahead of time makes your campaign creation process a lot smoother, but also gives you a moment to think critically about those upcoming ads. And this helps determine what you're going to try to highlight, confirm your images match along with your goal, and write thoughtful and engaging ad copy. So we're going to go ahead and talk about ad creative. So when we say ad creative, what we're talking about is actually just the photos or the videos you're going to use when you're creating those ads. And there's a ton of different ways that you can showcase your ads and showcase your product. But we just want to go over a couple of quick, easy do's and don'ts when it comes to utilizing images and videos and all of that. So first things first is do make sure that you're using high quality imagery that showcases your product. So Facebook has some minimum image files requirements. So it's going to make sure that your files are not below a certain image aspect ratio. That way, no matter what platform it's being shown on, it's gonna look high quality. But really want to make sure that that is a high quality, really clear, product focused imagery. Even if you're using lifestyle imagery, making sure that it's clear what your product is in there. And then don't use too much text. So whether you're using video or a still image, so Facebook actually has a limitation on the amount of text that you can use on an image, and it's kind of changed up a little bit recently, but overall, even beyond just Facebook's rule on those text amounts on images, you don't want to overwhelm anybody with too much, and it starts to feel kind of gimmicky if you're putting too much text on your imagery. So just making sure that any of the necessary text you feel like needs to be included on an image, utilizing that inside of your ad copy. So inside of that text that is going to accompany that ad is a much stronger and more reliable place to put all that information. Next thing is you do want to utilize a mix of images and videos as much as you can. So every consumer on the platform is different, and some people respond more to lifestyle imagery. Some people respond more to product specific photography. Some people really like video. Some people really respond to I call them GIFs, but I think it's probably GIF is what everyone tells me, but I will forever call them GIFs. Anyway, so different people are going to respond differently to your images and to your videos. So trying to utilize a mix of all of those things, at least initially early on, as you're trying to figure out what people are going to respond to the best, kind of using a mix and putting things out there and seeing what the customer really is going to respond to is great. And also just throughout time, like just making sure that you're using a mix so that everything doesn't ever feel too incredibly stale throughout the time. So then next is don't use the same aspect ratio for all placements. So as you'll see when we get into actually constructing our ads, you can choose where your ads are running. So whether that's on Instagram feeds versus Instagram stories versus Facebook feeds, and the list goes on. There's quite a few placements that you can select. So making sure to understand where your image is going to be used in kind of like that final presentation out to your customer, and having it properly cropped for that placement. You likely have seen ads on Instagram story that were not clearly built for that placement, where it was a square image that really should have been built to take up the whole screen. And so, making sure that when you're building these things out, building out those ad sets that are going to be, we're only serving this ad set to a specific to Instagram stories or to Instagram feeds, and then filling in your content inside of that to match where that final location is, so that it just ultimately it's another presentation form of your brand, And there's a couple of times where we kind of throw the aspect ratio idea out the window, but we'll explain a little bit more as we get further into it. So something that you do want to do is making sure to update your ad creative and your ad copy on a fairly regular basis. So um, Facebook is, a really big place, and but a ton of people know the kind of annoyance or just like slight irritation of being served the exact same ad for months on end. So people who only use the same images, and that image has been served to you for the last 6 months, and you're both wanting to not be served that ad anymore, and if you are being served that ad, you want to see a new photo or a new copy or anything. So making sure that you are updating your ad creative and your ad copy, and that you have all of the things in the pipeline that you need to change out on a current basis. Our recommendation is that you change everything out about every 4 weeks. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, that kind of concept of being overserved an ad as we get into our final segment where we review our ads, and we'll talk about frequency. Next thing, and kind of our final piece of advice here on ad creative, is don't forget why your images are there. So I'm sure if you are at a point and you're ready for Facebook ads, you have probably done some photo shoots or some video shoots. You probably have a lot of like really cool concept stuff. And that's great. And some of those things can be really powerful and impactful, but they maybe aren't the best for the ad space. It's really easy, to put those kind of cool and interesting photos on social media. But you have to remember that the ultimate goal of any sort of ad creative on Facebook and Instagram in this context is to sell your product. So you have to make sure that if I see an image, that it is clear what this image is about or what this image is selling, or, I really have to look at that image or video, not to cut that out, and understand what your brand does and is. So just making sure, even if you have some really, really interesting photography or some really cool concept videos, that at the end of the day, whatever the creative is that you're choosing to put on for the ad platform clearly shows what it is that you're selling, what your product is, what your brand is. All right. So, to be honest, as we get into this next section, someone I'm sure out there has written an entire course on how to write great ad copy. But we're going to kind of start with some general tips and tricks here. So your ad copy is the text that's going to accompany your ad. So we broke down ad creative. You can use photo, video, kind of our best practices there. And all of this ad copy and where it goes in relation to your ad creative is based on your placement. So Facebook and Instagram both have a variety of areas where you can place those ads, like we mentioned before, with stories and feeds, and they can be served on desktop versus mobile. And so because of this, similar to our ad creative, the ad copy shows up differently in each place. So we're going to break down the 3 main segments of ad copy, how placements affect them, and how to write copy for each of them. And keep in mind that there's not an end all be all for any of our recommendations here on writing ad copy. So first thing is our body text. So in this image here, you see we've kind of outlined the text that is above this image. So if no matter what platform you're on, this is pretty much the same across the board. The body text is included in most of the areas. So if you're on Instagram, think of this as the text for your caption. And on Facebook, this is a block of text that sits above your image. The body text can be fairly long, but the best ad copy is when it's short and sweet and to the point. So check out our blank product, take it home today and see what blank can do for you. The important thing to kind of call out and notice here is that we opened our copy with a verb. If you've worked in marketing at all, you're familiar, hopefully, with the idea of a call to action to encourage our consumers to engage. So you don't want to just kind of like leave it out there. You do want to include something that's like, hey, come to our site. Hey, come check us out. Obviously, people have mixed emotions about feeling kind of needy or grabbing for attention with these things, but I promise you there are plenty of ways that you can do a call to action without feeling that way. So it's really good to kind of launch our body text with that call to action and keep our attention of our potential customer as we move through. So it's pretty similar across all of the platforms when it comes to the different placements. So like I mentioned, so Facebook, it's going to kind of sit above the image. On Instagram, it's going to look like the caption, similar to any other normal Instagram image would look. So one recommendation that we do have is if you're utilizing Facebook and Instagram stories, it can be useful to place some small text on the image itself to help reinforce your call to action. So when you get into the story placements, the text starts to look a little bit different. And so some of that information can kind of get confusing. So if you can add some small text to your images that are going out on Instagram stories or Facebook stories, or those videos, if you're using videos, that, it's the same kind of call to action, that's going to be really strong, specifically for those placements, just because the body text portion is not going to show up the same way. So if you have slightly longer text, some of it might get cut off when you're using stories. So next we'll move through is headlines. So in our image here, you can see that we've circled this headline that's down below the image. Again, this is an example of an ad from Allbirds that's on being placed on Facebook. So headlines are not technically available on Instagram. So when you place a headline on an Instagram placement, it shows up as a part of the body text just at the beginning. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into some of our kind of campaign efficiencies and talk about duplication. So if you make something and it's available on all platforms, it's going to give you the option of creating a headline, and it's going to give you the option of creating a description. And on Instagram, the description we don't worry about, but the headline is going to come up as the front of that body text. Versus on Facebook, both mobile and desktop, the headlines are a separate text. Like I said, in this image here, it's the bold text that sits below the imagery. So your headline should be about 30 characters or less. After 30 characters, it starts to overflow and you start to lose, it starts to not be legible right off the bat. So you can write slightly longer headlines, but you want something that everyone can read right away without having to click a more button or where it's getting cut off. And you want something that's going to grab attention quickly. So restate what your product is, make a call out about a sale or a promo, highlight a unique feature, but really use that headline text to draw people into your ad even further. And then last thing here is our description. So again, in our image here, you can see the description is highlighted, circled at the bottom here, right underneath our headline. So descriptions are not available on Facebook. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about this when we're building your ads and how to build them efficiently a little bit later. But on Facebook, desktop and mobile, descriptions are that smaller subtext underneath your headline. And it's just an opportunity to offer consumers some sort of qualifier. So you could mention your average product rating, pull a quote from some sort of PR outlet. So if you guys have been featured in a magazine or in a newspaper or something like that, an opportunity to pull that out there. But it's a space meant for additional information. So consumers have enough knowledge to feel comfortable to click into your ad and make a purchase. So it's just kind of a space where you don't want to overwhelm them with information, but you do want to add something in there, add a little bit extra value so that, they're not hesitant to click into your ads. And then we pulled some ad samples here. Obviously, the far right one here with this Lululemon is the video, so you can't see it. But we want to just talk about the ad copy here. So we used an Allbirds one previously, but they do a really great job with all of their ads. Their imagery is super clean. But in this one, so they've got product feature called call outs in the body and the description. It's really informational focused. And then they've got another product specific call out in their headline. So their headline is speaking specifically to the product that you can see in the image. Their body text is talking about like how they make their products. So they mention sustainable, they're talking about their materials, and the description again is adding kind of more qualifying information. So it's talking about the comfort, it's talking about like kind of how it would feel to actually wear this product. So Allbirds is a great example. Glossier does an awesome job with their ads. They use actually a lot of user generated content in their ad creative, and it does incredibly well. But here they've got a little bit more of an extended body text that explains what the product does and how to use it. So obviously, if you're unfamiliar, Glossier is a makeup and cosmetics company, and they do a lot of like kind of skincare and different things of that nature as well. And so here we've got exactly what the product is, and even though it's not the same kind of call out or call to action, they do have it opens with a verb, right? Meet is pulling you in. You're like wanting to be introduced here. But yeah, so they use extended body text that explains what the product does and